What if I told you that most of what you see, hear, and believe isn't real? Your brain doesn't show you the world as it is. It shows you a fast, edited version designed for survival, not truth. And that's why learning feels hard, why being wrong hurts, and why your mind confidently lies to you every day. The question isn't whether your brain lies, it's whether you know how to catch it. Your brain does not wait patiently for reality to arrive and then record it like a camera. Instead, it works more like a fast, nervous storyteller that is constantly guessing what should be happening next. Every second it takes past experiences, memories, and expectations and uses them to predict what you are about to see, hear, or feel. Only after making this prediction does it briefly check reality to see if the guess was good enough. If the difference is small, your brain doesn't bother correcting it. This is why two people can look at the same situation and walk away with completely different interpretations, both convinced they saw the truth. This predictive shortcut is the reason illusions work so well. When you see faces in clouds or hear your name in random noise, your brain is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what it evolved to do. It prefers speed over accuracy. In the wild, reacting quickly to a possible threat mattered more than carefully analyzing whether the shadow was truly a predator. That survival advantage is still built into you today, even though most of your decisions are no longer about life and death. As a result, your mind often shows you what it expects, not what is actually there. Because the brain relies so heavily on prediction, it quietly fills in missing information without asking for permission. When you read a sentence with a few letters missing, you still understand it. When someone speaks unclearly, you automatically guess the words. Even your vision works this way. You are not seeing a complete, detailed picture of the world. You are seeing a rough sketch that your brain confidently paints over with assumptions. The unsettling truth is that you rarely notice these assumptions because the brain hides the edits from your conscious awareness. This creates a powerful illusion of certainty. You feel like you are directly experiencing reality, when in fact you are experiencing a carefully constructed guess. That confidence is useful for daily life, but it becomes a serious obstacle to learning. When the brain thinks it already knows what is going on, it stops paying attention. New information is filtered out or bent to fit existing beliefs. This is why people can be shown clear evidence and still remain unconvinced. Their brains have already decided what must be true. Learning requires breaking this prediction loop. To learn something new, the brain must admit that its expectations are wrong, but this feels uncomfortable because prediction errors demand mental effort. The brain has to slow down, revise its model of the world, and rebuild understanding from the ground up. That takes energy, and the brain naturally resists it. So instead of updating beliefs, it often chooses the easier path, ignoring contradictions and preserving familiar ideas. Once you realize that your perception is a prediction, not a recording, something important changes. You become more cautious about your own certainty. You start asking better questions instead of defending quick conclusions. You notice when something feels obvious and treat that feeling with suspicion rather than trust. This shift does not make you weaker or indecisive, it makes you more accurate. You move from reacting to reality to actively testing it. Understanding that your brain predicts the world is the first step toward real learning. It teaches humility, patience, and curiosity. Instead of assuming your mind is a reliable narrator, you learn to see it as a helpful but imperfect guide. And the moment you stop confusing confidence with truth, your mind finally opens the door to learning how the world actually works. When someone challenges one of your beliefs, your reaction is rarely calm and curious. Instead, there is often a sudden tightening in the chest, a rush of heat, or an urge to argue back immediately. This response feels emotional, but it is actually biological. Your brain treats being wrong as a form of danger. Long before logic gets a chance to speak, the nervous system activates defensive circuits designed to protect you from harm. The mind does not ask, is this claim true? It asks, is this threatening who I am and how I understand the world? This happens because beliefs are not just ideas floating in your head, they are tied to identity, memory, and survival. Over time, your brain builds a mental model of reality that helps you predict outcomes and feel in control. When that model is attacked, the brain interprets it as instability. Uncertainty signals risk. In evolutionary terms, uncertainty meant exposure, vulnerability, and poor decisions. So the brain learned to associate certainty with safety, even when that certainty is based on false information. Once this threat response activates, thinking changes. The brain releases stress hormones that narrow attention and reduce flexibility. Instead of exploring new information, the mind switches into protection mode. It searches for flaws, dismisses opposing views, and selectively remembers details that support existing beliefs. This is why debates often feel pointless. Each side believes they are being logical, but both brains are busy defending, not learning. Fear quietly takes control, and curiosity is pushed aside. This reaction also explains why people cling so strongly to incorrect ideas. Letting go of a belief feels like losing a piece of stability. The brain asks, if this is wrong, what else might be wrong? That question opens the door to uncertainty, and the brain slams it shut. It is easier to double down on a familiar idea than to face the discomfort of not knowing. As a result, misinformation spreads not because people are stupid, but because their brains are trying to stay safe. The tragedy is that this fear-based response blocks learning at the exact moment it is needed most. Learning requires openness, flexibility, and the willingness to revise mental models. But fear does the opposite. It locks beliefs in place and creates the illusion of strength through stubbornness. People mistake confidence for understanding and emotional resistance for intelligence. In reality, the strongest minds are not the ones that never feel threatened, but the ones that notice the threat and choose not to obey it. Training the brain to learn means changing the relationship with being wrong. Instead of treating errors as attacks, they must be reframed as information. Every challenge becomes a signal that the brain's model is incomplete, not that the person is flawed. This shift takes practice, because it goes against instinct. It requires slowing down the automatic reaction and creating a small pause between feeling threatened and responding. Over time, that pause becomes powerful. When the brain learns that being wrong does not lead to harm, the fear response weakens. Curiosity begins to replace defensiveness. Questions feel safer than arguments. Instead of protecting beliefs, the mind starts testing them. This is when real learning accelerates, because the brain is no longer wasting energy on defense and can invest it in understanding. Recognizing that fear, not logic, often drives resistance to new ideas is deeply freeing. It removes shame from being wrong and replaces it with awareness. You stop asking why people refuse to change their minds and start understanding how difficult it is for the brain to let go of certainty. And once you see this in others, you begin to see it in yourself. That awareness is the first step toward a mind that chooses growth over comfort and learning over illusion. One of the most convincing tricks your mind plays on you is the feeling of understanding something when you actually don't. This illusion is powerful because it feels calm, confident, and satisfying. When you hear an explanation that sounds familiar or uses words you recognize, your brain quickly labels it as understood and moves on. But recognition is not comprehension. The mind often confuses the comfort of familiarity with real knowledge, and this confusion quietly shuts down learning before it even begins. This illusion grows stronger in a world filled with summaries, slogans, and simplified explanations. You hear a concept explained once, nod along, and assume it makes sense. But when you are asked to explain it yourself, especially in simple language, everything falls apart. Gaps appear, definitions blur. The logic that seemed obvious moments ago becomes slippery. This is not a failure of intelligence. It is evidence that the original understanding was shallow. The brain stored the idea as a label, not as a working model. The mind prefers this illusion because it saves energy. Building true understanding requires effort, patience, and repeated correction. It means holding confusion in your awareness instead of escaping it. The brain resists this because confusion feels like incompetence. It creates a sense of unease, as if something is wrong. So the mind rushes to close the gap by accepting explanations that sound good enough, even if they lack depth. This gives the comforting feeling of knowing without the cost of actually learning. Another reason this illusion persists is that modern learning often rewards confidence rather than clarity. People who speak smoothly and use complex language appear knowledgeable, even when their explanations are vague. The brain picks up on this social cue and assumes understanding has occurred. But real understanding is often messy and slow. It involves stopping mid-sentence, questioning assumptions, and admitting uncertainty. These behaviors do not look impressive, but they are signs that genuine learning is happening. True understanding reveals itself not through recognition, but through reconstruction. If you can rebuild an idea from scratch, explain why it works, and predict what happens when conditions change, then understanding exists. If you cannot, the knowledge is incomplete. This is why trying to teach an idea to someone else is such a powerful test. Teaching exposes every hidden gap the illusion of understanding tries to conceal. The struggle you feel in that moment is not weakness, it is the mind confronting reality. The illusion of understanding is especially dangerous because it creates false confidence. When you believe you understand something, you stop questioning it. You stop exploring alternative explanations. You stop noticing contradictions. The mind locks the idea in place and protects it, just like any other belief tied to identity. This freezes learning and turns knowledge into something static, even though reality is dynamic and complex. Breaking free from this illusion requires a shift in attitude. Instead of asking, "Does this sound right?" the better question is, "Can I explain this simply?" Simplicity is not about reducing ideas to slogans, it is about clarity. Simple explanations expose weak foundations. They force the brain to organize ideas logically and confront missing links. This process often feels uncomfortable because it reveals how much was assumed rather than understood. When you accept confusion as part of learning, the illusion loses its power. You stop chasing the feeling of knowing and start valuing the process of figuring things out. Understanding becomes something you build, test, and refine, not something you collect. This mindset transforms learning from passive consumption into active exploration. In the end, the illusion of understanding fades when you stop trusting how knowledge feels and start testing how it works. The moment you allow yourself to say, "I don't fully get this yet," your mind opens up again. And in that openness, real understanding begins to take shape slowly, imperfectly, and far more truthfully than the comforting illusion it replaces. Real learning does not happen when things feel smooth and easy. It happens when something goes wrong. When your expectations fail, when an answer surprises you, or when a mistake refuses to disappear, the brain is forced to pay attention. This moment of failure is not an interruption to learning, it is the engine of it. The brain is designed to learn by correcting errors, not by passively absorbing information. Without error, there is nothing to update, and without discomfort, there is no reason for the mind to change. Every time you make a prediction about the world, your brain is quietly running a test. When the result matches the prediction, the brain stays comfortable and unchanged. But when the prediction fails, a signal is triggered. That signal feels like confusion, frustration, or doubt. Most people instinctively try to escape this feeling as quickly as possible. They look for shortcuts, memorize answers, or avoid the problem altogether. In doing so, they silence the very signal that tells the brain to grow. Discomfort is often mistaken for incompetence. When learning feels hard, people assume something is wrong with them. In reality, something is finally going right. The brain is being pushed beyond familiar patterns and forced to reorganize itself. Neural connections strengthen not when information is repeated mindlessly, but when errors are detected and corrected. Each mistake highlights a gap between expectation and reality, and that gap is where learning lives. This is why struggling with a problem leads to deeper understanding than immediately being shown the answer. The effort of grappling with uncertainty prepares the brain to receive new information. When the correction arrives, it has somewhere to land. Without the struggle, the correction remains superficial and quickly fades. The brain remembers what it worked for, not what it was handed. Reframing mistakes as feedback rather than failure is one of the most powerful shifts a learner can make. A mistake is not a verdict on intelligence, it is a data point. It tells you exactly where your current understanding breaks down. Instead of hiding errors, effective learners examine them closely. They ask what assumption led to the mistake and why it seemed reasonable at the time. This transforms errors from something to fear into something to use. Over time, this approach changes how the brain responds to difficulty. Instead of triggering avoidance, challenges begin to trigger curiosity. The mind learns that discomfort is temporary and useful. Confidence no longer comes from being right, but from knowing how to recover when wrong. This kind of confidence is flexible and resilient, not fragile and defensive. Learning environments often unintentionally punish this process. Fast answers are praised while slow thinking is overlooked. Correctness is rewarded more than exploration. As a result, many people learn to avoid risks and stick to what they already know. But growth lies at the edge of understanding, not in its comfort zone. The brain needs room to fail safely in order to adapt. When you deliberately seek situations where mistakes are likely, you give your brain permission to evolve. You stop chasing perfection and start chasing progress. Each error becomes a guide, pointing toward a deeper and more accurate model of reality. Learning turns into an active conversation between your expectations and the world, rather than a passive intake of information. In the end, the discomfort of learning is not a sign that you are doing it wrong. It is proof that you are doing it correctly. The brain learns by being challenged, corrected, and stretched. When you stop running from confusion and start listening to it, learning stops being fragile and becomes durable. And once you understand that mistakes are the path, not the obstacle, your mind becomes capable of growing in ways comfort never could.